Take notice some of the information you'll be given as it relates to Chester and Dr. King's time in Chester. Sit back and enjoy and appreciate the fact that we had a leader who made pathways for all of us to be who we are today. Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring.
Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies.
Let it resound loud as the rolling sea.
Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Let's sing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
On Tuesday, January 15, 1929, at noon, Martin Luther King Jr. is born Michael King Jr. in Atlanta. His father is the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, a black congregation in Atlanta. His mother is Alberta Williams King, a former school teacher. In honor of the German religious reformer Martin Luther, the elder King later changes his name to Martin Luther King, and his son's name to Martin Luther King Jr. He lived with his parents, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr. and Alberta Williams King, as well as his grandparents and his two siblings, Christine and Alfred Daniel Williams King. He was a brilliant student who skipped 2 grades and earned his bachelor's degree at 18. The King children all took piano lessons from their mother. They also enjoyed playing sports such as football and baseball and doing other odd jobs. Martin was a paper boy and wanted to be a fireman when he grew up. Their father was a Baptist minister, and he was in charge of the children's moral and religious education. At the age of 5, Martin Luther King Jr. began school at Young Street Elementary School in Atlanta. This, however, was before the legal school entrance age of 6. Thus, Martin was not allowed to continue his education until he turned 6 years old. Following his education at Young Street Elementary School, he attended David T. Howard Elementary School. He also attended the Atlanta University Laboratory School and Booker T. Washington High School. He was a brilliant student and got all kinds of accolades for his academics. He scored so high on his college entrance exam at Booker High School that he did not formally finish high school. He went on to college in his junior year. One day, Martin and his father went to buy some new shoes. The clerk told them to go back to the store because they were not able to be serviced in the front of the store. Martin and his father proceeded to leave the store as they knew that this was not respectful treatment. Martin's mother told him, even though some people make you feel bad or angry, you should not show it. You are as good as anyone.
I am Martin Luther King. When I was little, my best friend and I had so much fun. We played together every day. We enjoyed playing all kinds of games. He was almost like my brother. But something happened when we started school. He went to one school and I went to another. Then his daddy told him that he couldn't play with me any longer because I was black. That was the first time I had ever experienced racism. I was only 6 years old and I had lost my best friend who was white.
King Jr. was admitted to the Morehouse College in 1944 following his junior year in high school, as the school's enrollment fell with the wartime draft. A friend of King's, Walter McCall, recalled that King was an ordinary student during this time at Morehouse. I don't think he took his studies very seriously, but seriously enough to get by. King did, however, flourish in other areas, winning second prize in the John Webb oratorical competition in 1946 and 1948. King was president of the Sociology Club, as well as a member of the debate team, student council, glee club, and ministers' union. King also joined the Morehouse chapter of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People and played on the Butler Street YMCA basketball team. King graduated from Morehouse College in 1948 with a bachelor's degree in sociology. He spends the next 3 years at Crozier Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. Upon his arrival, he discovered he was only one of 11 black students at the seminary at the time, which caused him to be self-conscious initially. He later thrived in the program, excelling in his public speaking skills, becoming class president in his 3rd year and graduating with honors as the class valedictorian in 1951. During his time at Crozier, King was first exposed to the idea of pacifism. This later helped him to develop his ideology of nonviolent protesting as a means of social reform. It is here that he first learns about Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. When Martin Luther King was attending Crozier Theological Seminary, he became very close to Reverend John Pius Barber, the Reverend at Calvary Baptist Church here in Chester, which is really over on Route 291. Barbara played an almost father-like figure to King during his studies, and King often returned to Calvary Church well after his time at Crozier. In fact, Calvary was one of Dr. King's first visits after he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. To date, a little piece of history still stands at this church. When Reverend Bayard Taylor took over as pastor of Calvary in 2000, he told a story of how he sought to remove a mirror that was hanging in his office until he was told that Dr. King wondered aloud, "Who am I?" while gazing into that mirror during his visit. And so that mirror stays still in the office there at Calvary Baptist Church. King then attended graduate school at Boston University. In Boston, King met Coretta Scott. They were married in 1953. The following year, King moved his family to Montgomery, Alabama, and became pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. He received a PhD in theology from Boston University in 1955.
I am Martin Luther King. My awareness of social and political issues began to grow while I was at Morehouse. The summer before my junior year, I wrote a letter to the editor of Atlanta Constitution, responding to a series of racially motivated murders in Georgia. In the letter, I summarized the goals of black citizens. We want and are entitled to the basic rights and opportunities of American citizens. The right to earn a living at work for which we are filled by training and ability, equal opportunities in education, health, recreation, and similar public service, to the right to vote, equality before the law, some of the same courtesy and good manner that we all ourselves bring to all human relations.
While Dr. Martin Luther King is in Alabama, he leads many demonstrations and is arrested. In 1959, a visit to India gives King a long-awaited opportunity to study Gandhi's techniques of nonviolent protest. In 1963, King writes what comes to be known as the letter from the Birmingham jail. That spring, King had participated in a campaign in Birmingham, Alabama, to end segregation at lunch counters and in hiring practices. Police had turned dogs and fire hoses on the protesters, and King had been arrested along with a large number of his supporters. In the Birmingham jail, King writes an open letter to his fellow clergymen explaining his philosophy of nonviolence and why he would continue to protest. In 1965, the historic Selma March, also called the Selma to Montgomery March, takes place. It is a political march from Selma, Alabama, to the state's capital, Montgomery. King leads the march as part of an effort to register black voters in the state. Demonstrators had twice attempted the march in the preceding weeks. On Sunday, March 7, known as Bloody Sunday, they had been violently turned back by local police officers. 2 weeks after Bloody Sunday, as many as 25,000 people participate in the roughly 50-mile march over 5 days. The Selma March and the events surrounding it become a symbol of the civil rights movement. That march led directly to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965.
I am Martin Luther King. The tendency is to ignore the Negro's contribution to America's life and to strip him of his personhood. It is as old as the earliest history book and as contemporary as the morning newspaper. To upset the cultural homicide, the Negro must rise up with affirmation of his own Olympian manhood. Any movement from the Negro freedom that overlooks this necessity is only waiting to be buried. As long as the mind is enslaved, the body can never be free. Psychology, freedom. A firm sense of self-esteem is the most powerful weapon against the long nights of physical slavery. No Lincoln-Oleum, Emancipation, a Proclamation, or Johnson-Oleum Civil Rights Bill can totally bring this kind of freedom. The Negro will only be free when he reaches down to the inner depths of his own being and signs with the pen and ink of assertive manhood, of his own emancipation, a proclamation, and with a spirit straining true to his true self-esteem. The Negro must boldly throw off the mask of self-abnegation and say to himself and to the world, I am somebody. I am a person. I am a man with dignity and honor. I have a rich and noble history. How painful and exploited that history has been. Yes, I was a slave throughout my foreparents. I am not ashamed of that. I'm ashamed of the people who were sinful to make me a slave. Yes, we must stand up and say I'm black and I'm beautiful, as this is a self-affirmation, as the black man's need made compelling by the white man's crime against him.
In 1955, Martin Luther King joined the Boycott after Rosa Parks is arrested and is elected president of the Montgomery Improvement Association. This made him the official spokesperson for the boycott. A year later, on November 13, the Supreme Court rules that bus segregation is illegal, ensuring the victory for the boycott. In 1957, Dr. King forms the Christian Leadership Conference to fight segregation and achieve civil rights. The following year, 1958, the U.S. Congress passes the first Civil Rights Act since Reconstruction. Dr. King resigns as pastor from the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in 1959 to concentrate on civil rights full time. He moves back to Atlanta to direct the activities of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and becomes co-pastor with his father at the Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, where he attended as a child.
I am Martin Luther King. America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but it gave the slaves no land and nothing in reality. As a matter of fact, to get started on, at the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and Midwest, which meant there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base, and it yet refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. So the emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate. Therefore, freedom and famine at the same time. And when the white American tells the Negro to lift himself by its own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy from slavery and segregation. We believe ought to do all we can seek is to lift ourselves by our own bootstrap. But it's just cruel to say to a bootless man to lift himself by its own bootstrap. And many Negroes, by the thousands and millions, have been left bootless as a result of all these years of oppression and a result of society that deliberately made his skin color a stigma, something worthless and degrading.
In 1964, King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize at the age of 35, the youngest person ever to receive this honor. After President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law, Martin Luther King turned to socioeconomic problems. He became a vocal opponent of the Vietnam War, calling it an unjust and illegal war that harmed the poor in the United States. He believed that the war was immoral and that the United States should use nonviolent means to end it. While King was personally opposed to the war, he was concerned that publicity criticizing U.S. foreign policy would damage his relationship with President Lyndon B. Johnson, who had been instrumental in passing civil rights legislation and who had declared in April 1965 that he was willing to negotiate a diplomatic end to the war in Vietnam. Though he avoided condemning the war outright, King, at the August 1965 annual Southern Christian Leadership Conference, called for a halt to bombing in North Vietnam, urged that the United Nations be empowered to mediate the conflict, and told the crowd that what is required is a small step that may establish a new spirit of mutual confidence, a step capable of breaking the silence and the cycle of mistrust, violence, and war. In 1965, King delivered the famous Beyond Vietnam speech at the Riverside Church in New York City. In this speech, he argued that the war was immoral and that it should be condemned and that we should find a peaceful negotiation to end it. Martin Luther King Jr. also believed that poverty was a social injustice that could and should be eliminated. He called for the creation of policies that would ensure that all people had access to the basic necessities of life. He felt that poverty was caused by a combination of factors, including lack of education, poor housing, and fragile family relationships. In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. led the Chicago Freedom Movement, a campaign to end civil rights abuse in Chicago. The campaign involved demonstrations, marches, and negotiations with city officials. The Chicago Housing Authority agreed to build public housing with limited requirements for those trying to enter. The Mortgage Bankers Association agreed to make mortgages more available regardless of race. However, they all reneged, which caused great disappointment with Dr. Martin Luther King. King traveled to Memphis, Tennessee in support of striking African-American city sanitation workers. The workers had staged a walkout in February 11, 1968 to protest unequal wages and working conditions imposed by the mayor. In March 1968, after speaking in Greensboro, Alabama, King was hunted by the Ku Klux Klan members and used a local home, now the Safe House Museum, as a safe house before traveling to Memphis. He participated in a massive march in Memphis on March 28 in 1968, which ended in violence. On April 3rd, King returned to Memphis to attempt a successful new march later that week. His airline flight to Memphis was delayed by a bomb threat, but he arrived in time to make a planned speech to a gathering at the Mason Temple.
I am Martin Luther King. And then I got into Memphis, and some began to say threats or talk about the threats that were out. What will happen to me from some of our sick white brothers? Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but that doesn't matter for me now, because I've been at that mountaintop, and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. And he's allowed me to go up on that mountain. And I looked over, and I seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we, as a people, we will get to that promised land. And I'm so happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything, and I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
overcome someday. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.
STEM Academy, although Dr. Martin Luther King is not with us physically, he is here in spirit. He's calling for you to find your voice. He's calling for you to find your power. Every cell in your body is listening to you. The universe is listening to you. So, join with me right now. Put your hand on your heart. Put your hand on your heart and say with me this proclamation. I have genius.
I have genius.
I am love.
I am love.
I will fulfill the purpose for my life.
I will fulfill the purpose of my life.
When the world looks for me, I will be there.
I will be there.
Thank you for joining us today.
If I can have Ms. Sparks, Ms. Arnold, and our cast of students please step up front to be acknowledged. The Kings, come on down. And our choir. Great. So we gave a short program. It's moving, it's touching, and students and staff that work this program made it just especially for STEM. So please give them a round of applause for their presentation. Also for a job well done, as well as representing the principals and the heartfelt justice that Dr. Martin Luther King stood for. We spread this thought, we shared these words. We also had song to present to you, to uplift you, to move you, and to make you understand the significance of what social change, social justice, and social equality looks like. So once again, thank you for this team for putting on that production. Also want to thank our musical director, Mr. Woodland, for organizing the choir and presenting us with this music. Greatly appreciated. This ends our program. Thank you.